want to talk a little bit about the War Powers Act. A lot of people heard a little bit about that, especially with what's going on with Trump and Iran and other places like Cuba, Venezuela, Africa, even. Most people believe there's a law that limits the president to 60 days of war. After that 60 days, it has to stop. Sounds simple. This gives them a timeline before they can actually declare a war, which we've heard, the Iranian war, right? Sounds simple, but here's the problem. That limit doesn't actually stop anything. The idea comes from the War Powers Resolution of 1973, right when Nixon got kicked out of office, right? And the people understand it is pretty straightforward. The president can act for 60 days, and then the Congress has to approve it or not. And if they don't, then the military action has to stop, period. That sounds like a hard rule, a barrier, a stopping line right there, like a timer. Like something that actually controls war, if that's really what can go on. But in reality, it doesn't work like that. Just take some basic common sense for a second. If bombs are dropping, missiles are flying, guns are blazing, that's war. That's hostilities, no matter what kind of label you want to put on it. That's all there is to it. But here's where things kind of start to change. The law, of course, the law, doesn't clearly define the word hostilities, and that's done on purpose. So in practice, those same actions can be described as limited strikes, support roles like advisors, or targeted operations, specific operations. But they're the same actions, guys. They're still hostilities. They just give them a different name. And this isn't just theory, and this is something that's happened across multiple presidents. And we're just going to talk from Ronald Reagan on. With Ronald Reagan, we had Lebanon, Grenada, and Libya. Military was action. Congress was notified afterwards, but it wasn't treated like a 60-day clock that was real, like a real constraint. Actions first, explanations later. And we've heard about this all along since LBJ, all right? Now, George Bush, George H.W. the Senior, the Gulf War. Now, in this case, Congress was brought in along with the actions going on. Authorization was given. So when it's kind of politically necessary, the presidents follow the process. Now, this is a pattern with the Bush. Now, Bill Clinton, on the other hand, he went into Kosovo, Bosnia, and Serbia. And operations continued well beyond the 60 days. In fact, it's still continuing on without really recognizing it. And there was no clear authorization. And the argument was that it didn't meet the definition of the legal term of hostilities. Again, we addressed that just a while ago. What we term hostilities was someone taking action against us or another, whether physical, mental, verbal, or even blockades or sanctions. That's hostilities, right? We understand that, right? That's hostilities. Now, George Bush Jr., he had the Afghan war in Iraq. And here was broader congressional authorization was used, but we know how that went. Everybody's making a dollar. As long as somebody made dollars on this, it all went okay. And once that happened, the 60-day limit basically becomes irrelevant. And we had Obama, God help us. We had Libya, along with Clinton. You know how that went. There was airstrikes and drones. There actually wasn't no real troops, U.S. troops on the ground. There was what you call advisors and watchers and things like this. We all heard the story. We all know what happened and everything like that. And the argument begins. Was this that this did not rise to the level of hostilities? It didn't go up to actual combat hostilities as is described by the law at the time of the interpretation of it. Then we got Trump. And of course, we got Syria strikes, Iran tensions and stuff and like that and everything. Venezuela and Cuba and other places. Kept below the level that would trigger what they would call long-term oversight by committee or the Congress. But it's different presidents and it's the same pattern. So what's actually happening here? Presidents aren't really resetting the same day 60-day clock. They're avoiding the limitations of it, and they do it by keeping operations short. targeted operations, advisor roles, and things like this. Y'all have already heard the term, so you know what they're talking about. You know what it means. They define them very narrowly using older authorization or staying inside of a legal gray area, you know, whatever that means. So the clock never really starts and it really never ends or really never becomes a real problem. And the core truth of it is, guys, here's the part that most people miss. The law doesn't actually stop war. It gives Congress the power to stop it. And that's a big difference because if Congress doesn't act, nothing forces the operation to end. And we know how Donald Trump acts. If you don't get up in front of his face and say you have to stop it and maybe even smack him upside the head, he's not going to do it because he don't understand the word no or don't. And like a spoiled rich boy. So when people say there's a 60-day limit on war, that's not really true. There is a 60-day window for Congress to step in, and if they don't, it keeps going. That's the difference between what the law says and how it actually works. So you got a little bit of information why this 60-day War Powers Act thing that they keep talking about, throwing around on the news, really don't mean jack diddly because they just sidestep it with terminology and pausing of actions going on, peace treaties or peace discussions and things like that, or a closure for holidays even. And this is a cessation of actions, and they can go ahead and just sidestep that and start over again, if you will. In our world, in our terms, we would see it as another start of hostilities. But in their term, it is not really hostilities. It is not war. Even though they use the word war, it is not really actually a war until Congress says, hey, we're at war. So there it is, guys. We're being lied to about what's going on, of course. And this is going to continue on, like I've been telling you now, for at least 3 to 5 more years. Why? It's because the light crude oil production facilities will be up and running by the end of that time. And guess who's going to be standing on top of the oil pile or the gold pile? With DJT. Y'all have a groovy day. Go out and do something nice for somebody. Guys, the weather's warming up. If you're going to plant something, it's time to do it. Around here, they're telling us Mother's Day, so by the time Mother's Day gets here, we'll have our garden started. Y'all have a groovy day. Just be nice to somebody. Later, taters.
Attention passengers, we've now reached our destination. We hope you enjoyed the flight and have a nice day.